Ethan Vale had spent most of his life chasing stories that other people ignored. While journalists in the city fought for political scandals and celebrity rumors, Ethan preferred silence, forgotten roads, abandoned buildings, and places people avoided mentioning after sunset. He believed every empty structure carried a memory trapped inside its walls, waiting for someone patient enough to listen. The message arrived at 2:13 in the morning. No subject line, no signature, only a single sentence. No one can explain why Blackthorn Mansion was left behind overnight in 1978. Attached beneath the sentence was a blurry photograph of a giant mansion standing on top of a hill beneath dark storm clouds. The image looked old, damaged around the corners, as if it had survived fire or water. Ethan zoomed in on the mansion. Tall windows, massive stone pillars, dead vines crawling across the walls. And standing in the top floor window was the outline of a person. At first Ethan assumed it was another internet prank. Urban explorers constantly sent fake stories hoping for attention. But something about the image bothered him. He couldn't stop staring at it. He searched the mansion online. Nothing. No website. No archived article. No public records. It was as if Blackthorn Mansion had never existed. That was enough to make Ethan interested. By sunrise he was driving north through endless forests toward a forgotten town called Hollow Creek. According to an old map he found in a county archive, Blackthorn Mansion stood several miles outside the town limits. Rain hammered against the windshield as he entered Hollow Creek late in the evening. The town looked frozen in time. Old diners, closed stores, streetlights flickering weakly. People watched him from windows but quickly disappeared whenever he looked back. Ethan parked outside the only motel still operating. The sign above the entrance buzzed loudly. Vacancy. Inside, an elderly woman sat behind the desk knitting something with dark gray yarn. "You're not from around here," she said without looking up. "No." Ethan signed the register. "I'm looking for Blackthorn Mansion." The knitting needles stopped moving. For several seconds the woman remained completely still. Then she slowly lifted her eyes. "You should leave tomorrow morning." Ethan smiled politely. "That bad?" "No." Her voice trembled. "Worse." He tried asking questions, but the woman refused to speak further. She handed him a rusted room key and pointed upstairs. That night Ethan couldn't sleep. At around midnight he heard footsteps outside his room. Slow, dragging, back and forth across the hallway. He opened the door suddenly. Nobody there, only wet footprints leading toward the staircase. Ethan followed them. The footprints ended at the motel entrance. Outside, through heavy rain, he saw a figure standing across the road beneath a broken streetlight. Tall, motionless. Watching him, lightning flashed. The figure vanished. The next morning Ethan visited the local diner. Conversation stopped the moment he walked inside. An old man drinking coffee near the window stared at him carefully. "You went to the motel asking about Blackthorn?" Ethan nodded. The old man sighed. "City people always think stories are entertainment. I'm just curious. That place buried this town." The old man introduced himself as Walter Grady. He claimed he had lived in Hollow Creek his entire life. Walter explained that Blackthorn Mansion once belonged to the Blackthorn family, one of the wealthiest families in the state. In the 1960s they employed nearly half the town. Then, in autumn of 1978, the family vanished. Every single servant, every guest, gone overnight. Cars remained parked outside. Dinner sat untouched on tables. Lights still burned inside the mansion when police arrived. But no bodies were ever found. "What happened?" Ethan asked. Walter looked toward the rain-covered windows. "Depends who you ask. Tell me your version." Walter hesitated. "Some say the family got involved with occult practices. Others say they discovered something beneath the mansion. Beneath it, there are tunnels under those hills older than this town itself." Ethan leaned forward. "What kind of tunnels?" Walter lowered his voice. "The kind people stopped entering after hearing things whisper back." The diner became silent again. Everyone listening. Walter grabbed Ethan's wrist suddenly. "If you go there, don't stay after dark." Ethan drove toward Blackthorn Mansion shortly before noon. The road leading up the hill was nearly destroyed by weeds and cracked asphalt. Trees leaned inward so tightly it felt like entering a tunnel. Then he saw it. Blackthorn Mansion. Even larger than the photograph. The structure stood like a dead king overlooking the valley below. Massive iron gates hung open. Rainwater rolled down broken statues. Several windows were shattered. Yet despite decades of abandonment, the mansion looked strangely untouched. As if time itself had avoided disturbing it. Ethan stepped inside through the front doors. Dust covered everything. A grand staircase curved upward beneath a giant chandelier. Portraits lined the walls. Members of the Blackthorn family stared down with cold expressions. One portrait caught Ethan's attention. A young woman wearing a dark red dress. Her nameplate read, Evelyn Blackthorn. Her painted eyes looked almost alive. Ethan photographed every room carefully. The dining hall still contained plates on the table. Mold-covered bread, rotten wine, a child's cup tipped sideways. It truly looked as if everyone had disappeared in the middle of dinner. Then he heard it. A piano. Soft notes drifting through the mansion. Ethan froze. The melody came from upstairs. He followed the sound cautiously through endless hallways until he reached a ballroom. At the center stood a black piano. The keys moved on their own. One by one, a haunting melody echoed through the room. Ethan slowly approached. The music stopped. Silence swallowed the mansion. Then a whisper brushed against his ear. Leave. He spun around. Nobody there. His heartbeat thundered. Suddenly the ballroom doors slammed shut behind him. The chandelier above began swinging violently. Ethan rushed toward the doors and forced them open. The hallway outside was darker now. Much darker. As if evening had arrived instantly. He checked his watch. 6:47 p.m. Impossible. Only minutes had passed. Thunder shook the mansion. Ethan hurried downstairs. As he crossed the main hall, he noticed something horrifying. The portraits had changed. Every member of the Blackthorn family now appeared older. Decayed. Their painted skin gray. Eyes hollow. And Evelyn Blackthorn's portrait was gone entirely. A floorboard creaked behind him. Ethan turned slowly. A woman stood at the top of the staircase. Dark red dress. Pale skin. Long black hair hanging over her shoulders. Evelyn. She stared directly at him. Then pointed toward a door beneath the staircase. Before Ethan could speak, she vanished. The door beneath the staircase led into a narrow corridor descending underground. Cold air rose from below carrying the smell of wet earth. Every instinct told Ethan to leave. Instead he switched on his flashlight and descended. The tunnel stretched deeper beneath the mansion than he expected. Stone walls. Ancient symbols carved into the rock. Some looked burned. Others scratched violently as if someone tried destroying them. Far below, Ethan discovered a massive chamber. In the center stood a circular stone platform covered in black stains. Candles surrounded it. Thousands of melted candles. The walls were filled with names. Hundreds of names. People from Hollow Creek. And beneath them all one sentence repeated again and again. It wakes when remembered. Was something horribly wrong with his eyes? They were completely black. Richard slowly raised his glass toward Ethan. Our guest has arrived, he announced. The entire mansion became silent instantly. Every person turned toward Ethan together. Hundreds of eyes staring without blinking. Ethan felt trapped. Then the guests began smiling. Not naturally. Their mouths stretched too wide. Bones cracked beneath skin. One woman's jaw unhinged completely as black liquid poured from her mouth onto the floor. A man near the staircase twisted backward until his spine snapped loudly. Still smiling. Still staring. The music continued playing. Faster now. Violent piano keys crashing through the ballroom. Richard Blackthorn walked toward Ethan slowly. You know what humanity fears most? He asked calmly. Ethan couldn't move. Being forgotten. Richard stopped inches away. My family offered eternity. Thunder exploded outside. The walls trembled violently. Then something beneath the mansion roared. The sound shook Ethan's bones. The guests suddenly collapsed together. Their bodies convulsed across the floor while shadows poured from beneath their skin like smoke. Evelyn pulled Ethan backward. He's feeding them to it again. The floorboards cracked open across the hallway. Long black hands reached upward from the darkness below. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, grabbing at ankles, dragging screaming guests into the floor itself. Ethan watched in horror as a child disappeared beneath the wood while still crying for his mother. Richard simply smiled wider. You see, he whispered. The mansion lights exploded. Darkness swallowed everything. Then came the whispers. Everywhere. Inside walls. Inside floors. Inside Ethan's own mind. Remember us. Remember. Remember. Ethan fell to his knees clutching his head. Suddenly Evelyn grabbed his face. You must listen carefully. Her voice cut through the noise. There's a room hidden behind the library. What? My father kept something there. A journal. The mansion groaned around them. The journal contains the ritual that opened the chamber. Another roar shook the building. And the ritual that can close it. Ethan looked at her desperately. What happens to you if I close it? Evelyn hesitated. Then she smiled sadly. We disappear. Before Ethan could answer, the hallway behind them exploded inward. The creature from the tunnels crawled into the mansion. Its massive body unfolded across the ceiling like a nightmare spider. Human faces moved beneath its skin, screaming silently. The creature opened its giant mouth and spoke with hundreds of voices together. She belongs to us now. Evelyn shoved Ethan toward the library corridor. Go. Ethan ran. Behind him, the creature slammed against walls while Evelyn screamed. The mansion twisted around him unnaturally. Hallways stretched longer than before. Doors appeared where none existed earlier. The whispers grew louder. Every portrait along the walls now showed Ethan's face staring back at him. Older. Dead. Smiling. He finally found the library. Books covered the walls from floor to ceiling. At the center stood a fireplace burning with unnatural green flames. Ethan searched frantically until he discovered a hidden door behind a bookshelf. Inside was Richard Blackthorne's study. Dust covered the desk, but one object looked untouched. A black leather journal. Ethan opened it quickly. Most pages were filled with strange symbols and fragmented writings. But near the end he found a final entry. October 28, 1978. Tonight we open the gate fully. The Hollow One has promised eternal existence beyond flesh. It remembers all things. Soon it will remember us forever. Beneath the entry was a warning written in different handwriting. Probably Evelyn's. If anyone finds this, burn the heart below the chamber. Ethan frowned. Heart. Suddenly the study door slammed shut. The sound echoed through the study like a gunshot. Ethan spun around instantly. Richard Blackthorne stood in front of the door. But he no longer resembled a man. His body twitched unnaturally beneath his expensive black suit. Veins pulsed across his neck like living worms under pale skin. The darkness inside his eyes moved slowly, swirling like thick smoke trapped behind glass. And worst of all, the faces beneath his skin were clearer now. Dozens of them. Men, women, children, stretching outward from inside his flesh as if trapped beneath thin ice. Some were screaming, some crying. One pair of eyes suddenly opened inside Richard's chest and stared directly at Ethan. Richard smiled. You should not read things that belong to the dead. Ethan backed away, clutching the journal tightly. What is the heart? He demanded. For the first time Richard's smile faded slightly. The room became colder. Candles flickered violently. The heart, Richard whispered, is what remains of the first memory. Thunder exploded outside the mansion. The entire study trembled. Books fell from shelves around them. Richard stepped closer slowly. When humanity buried its oldest fears beneath the earth, something survived. The faces under his skin began whispering together. It waited, it listened, it remembered. Ethan's breathing became uneven. You fed people to it. Richard tilted his head. No. A horrible cracking sound echoed from his spine. I introduced them to eternity. Suddenly Richard's jaw stretched downward far beyond human limits. Black smoke poured from his mouth and spread across the ceiling like living darkness. Ethan ran. Richard lunged after him with terrifying speed. The study door burst open as Ethan sprinted back into the hallway. The mansion looked worse now. Walls pulsed slowly like breathing flesh. Black veins spread across paintings and ceilings. Somewhere downstairs people were screaming. Real screaming. Ethan rushed toward the staircase but froze halfway. The ballroom below had become a nightmare. The elegant guests were no longer human. Some crawled across walls upside down. Others dragged twisted bodies across the floor while their bones cracked loudly with every movement. One woman sat at the piano smashing random keys with broken fingers while blood streamed from her empty eye sockets. The music never stopped. At the center of the ballroom stood Evelyn. The creature from the tunnel circled around her slowly. Its massive spider-like limbs scraped against the ceiling while the human faces beneath its skin twisted desperately. She remembers too much, the creature hissed through hundreds of voices. Evelyn looked up and saw Ethan. Find the chamber, she screamed. The creature immediately turned toward him. Its giant mouth opened wider. Inside the darkness of its throat Ethan saw something moving. Hands. Hundreds of human hands reaching outward. The monster shrieked. Every window in the mansion shattered at once. Ethan ran down another corridor while the creature chased him across the walls and ceiling. Its limbs punched holes through wood and stone as it moved. The mansion itself seemed alive now. Doors slammed shut. Hallways changed direction. The floor beneath Ethan's feet softened like wet flesh. Then he saw it. A narrow staircase descending deeper underground. Far below, a red glow pulsed faintly in darkness. The chamber. Ethan rushed downward. The deeper he went, the hotter the air became. The stone walls looked ancient, far older than the mansion itself. Strange symbols covered every surface now, carved so deeply they looked clawed into the rock. Whispers surrounded him constantly. Not threatening anymore. Begging. Help us. Don't let it wake. Please. Ethan finally reached the bottom. The underground chamber had changed completely. The crack in the far wall was enormous now, stretching from floor to ceiling. Dark smoke poured endlessly from inside it. And at the center of the chamber, something was beating. Like a heart. Huge. Black. Suspended above the stone platform by thick veins attached to the walls. Thump. The sound shook the chamber. Thump. With every beat, Ethan saw flashes of memories around him. People laughing. Children playing. Families eating dinner. Then screaming. Fire. Darkness. Bones breaking. The heart was feeding on memories themselves. Ethan stared in horror as faces slowly formed across the surface of the massive black organ. They appeared for only seconds before melting back into flesh. One face looked directly at him. Walter Grady. His mouth opened silently. Burn it. Suddenly the chamber shook violently. Richard's voice thundered from the staircase behind Ethan. You have no idea what you are destroying. Richard descended slowly into the chamber. Behind him crawled the creature. And behind the creature came dozens of twisted townspeople, moving unnaturally through the tunnels. Their black eyes locked onto Ethan. The heart beat faster. Thump, thump, thump. Richard spread his arms wide. Do you know what happens when people are forgotten? He shouted. The darkness pouring from the crack twisted around him like smoke. They die twice. The creature shrieked loudly in agreement. Ethan gripped the journal tighter. You murdered all of them. Richard laughed. No, Ethan. His smile widened horribly. I saved them from oblivion. The townspeople began whispering together. A terrible endless sound, like thousands of voices trapped underwater. Then Ethan noticed something horrifying. The faces appearing inside the heart were changing. New faces. Modern faces. People Ethan recognized from Hollow Creek. The motel owner. The waitress from the diner. Even Lydia Mercer. His blood ran cold. The entity was still feeding. Still growing. Richard pointed toward Ethan slowly. And now, it will remember you too. The creature lunged. Ethan barely dodged as its massive limbs smashed into the stone platform. The heart pulsed violently behind it. Then Ethan remembered Evelyn's warning. Burn the heart below the chamber. He looked around desperately. Torches burned along the walls. Without thinking, Ethan grabbed one and sprinted toward the heart. The whispers became deafening instantly. No, stop. Don't erase us. The creature screamed and chased after him. Richard's face twisted with panic for the first time. You fool. You'll destroy everything. Ethan climbed onto the stone platform. The heart beat directly in front of him now. Massive. Wet. Alive. And inside its surface Ethan suddenly saw Evelyn's face. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Please, she whispered softly. Ethan froze. The creature climbed onto the platform behind him. Richard reached upward desperately. Then Evelyn's expression changed. End it. Ethan shoved the burning torch directly into the heart. For 1 second, silence. Then the chamber exploded with sound. The heart shrieked like thousands of dying voices screaming together. Black fire erupted across its surface. The veins attached to the walls snapped violently. The creature convulsed in agony, smashing into stone pillars as human faces burst from its skin screaming. Richard collapsed to his knees. No, no. The crack in the wall began closing rapidly. Dark smoke rushed backward into the abyss. The chamber crumbled around them. Ethan fell from the platform as the ground split open beneath his feet. The townspeople began disintegrating into black ash one by one. Some looked relieved, others terrified. Richard stared upward with tears streaming from his black eyes. You don't understand. His skin began cracking apart. We only wanted to be remembered. Then his body collapsed into dust. The creature let out one final horrifying scream before the darkness consumed it entirely. The chamber started collapsing. The chamber started collapsing. Stone screamed as it tore apart. The ceiling split open in long jagged fractures, and black dust poured down like ash from a dying world. Ethan hit the ground hard, the torch rolling out of his hand, still burning weakly as it slid across broken stone. Above him, the heart was no longer beating. It was dying. And it was angry. Tha-hump. One final convulsion sent a shockwave through the entire underground structure. The sound wasn't just physical anymore. It slammed directly into Ethan's mind, forcing memories into him that weren't his. Hundreds of lives. Hundreds of deaths. All collapsing into a single moment of unbearable noise. Ethan grabbed his head, screaming as visions flooded him. Walter sitting in the diner for the first time, Evelyn crying in a burning ballroom, Richard standing alone in an empty mansion long before the corruption, staring at the ground like he had already heard something answering him from below. Then it stopped. Silence hit like a physical udar. The heart cracked. A thin line of light appeared across its surface. Then another. Like glass breaking underwater. No, a voice whispered. Not Richard. Not the creature. All of them. Together. The heart began to split open. Ethan dragged himself backward as black fluid poured out, thick like oil mixed with blood. The veins attached to the walls recoiled violently, snapping one by one like dying roots. The chamber was collapsing faster now. Entire sections of wall were folding inward, swallowing tunnels behind them. Ethan forced himself to his feet. The exit. He had to find the exit. Behind him, the heart gave a final sound, almost like a breath trying to speak one last time. And then it burst. Not with an explosion of fire, but with silence. A silent implosion. Everything inside the chamber, voices, shadows, whispers, collapsed inward into a single point and vanished. The darkness simply stopped existing. Ethan didn't wait. He ran. The tunnels were breaking apart as he moved through them. Stone slabs fell from above, blocking paths he had just crossed seconds before. The walls were no longer stone in places, they looked like wet flesh being torn apart, as if the mountain itself was forgetting how to hold its shape. Behind him, something followed. Not the creature. Not Richard. Something worse. A sound. Like memory unraveling. The tunnels screamed. Ethan reached the staircase and climbed frantically, his hands slipping on wet stone. The mansion above was visible now through cracks in the ceiling, light pouring in where darkness used to rule. He burst through the final door, and fell into silence. The mansion was still. Too still. No whispers. No music. No footsteps. Only dust falling gently through broken ceilings. Ethan lay on the floor, gasping. Then he slowly sat up. The ballroom was empty. Completely empty. No guests. No servants. No Richard. No Evelyn. Only ruined furniture and a dead piano with its strings snapped like exposed bones. Ethan stood shakily. Hello, he called. His voice echoed too long. Too clean. He walked through the mansion. Every room was the same. Empty. But not abandoned. It felt erased. As if something had gone through every wall and removed the idea of life itself. He reached the front doors. They were open. The storm outside had stopped. The sky was gray, but calm. Too calm. Ethan stepped outside. Blackthorn Hill was different. The mansion no longer looked cursed. It looked forgotten. Half-collapsed stone. Overgrown vines. No trace of the nightmare that had swallowed it before. As if it had always been nothing more than ruins. Ethan walked down the hill slowly. Each step felt heavier than the last. Halfway down, he stopped. Something was wrong. He couldn't remember Richard's face clearly. He tried to hold on to Evelyn's voice, but it slipped away like water through fingers. Panic rose in his chest. No, I remember, but the memories were fading even as he spoke them. The mansion behind him no longer held any weight in his mind. It was becoming a blank space. A story he couldn't quite recall the ending of. By the time he reached the road, Ethan realized something terrifying. He couldn't remember why he had come here. That night, Ethan stayed in a motel in Hollow Creek. Or what used to be Hollow Creek. The town looked normal now. Too normal. No abandoned buildings. No silence. People walked the streets like nothing had ever been wrong. He asked the receptionist about Blackthorn Hill. She frowned. Never heard of it. Ethan showed her a trembling hand, trying to explain, but the words didn't form correctly. It was like the language itself refused to hold the memory. That night, he couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw flashes, a red dress, a burning piano, a black heart beating in the dark. But each image dissolved before it became clear. On the third night, Ethan woke up suddenly. His motel room was empty. Except for something new. A small patch of black dust on the floor. He stared at it. Then slowly, against every instinct, he touched it. Cold. Then warm. Then gone. His hand came back clean. Ethan stood up, shaking. And that's when he noticed the mirror. There was someone standing behind him. He turned instantly. Nothing. Empty room. But the mirror still showed it. A hallway. A dark hallway made of stone. And at the end of it, a figure. Tall. Motionless. Watching. Ethan stepped closer to the mirror. His breath fogged the glass. The figure didn't move, but the hallway behind it seemed to breathe. Slowly. Like something waiting. Then, just before the image faded, a whisper. Not from the mirror. From inside his own memory. It doesn't end when it's destroyed, Ethan froze. The mirror went black, and somewhere deep beneath everything, something began to remember again. Ethan stepped away from the mirror slowly. His reflection returned to normal. Just a tired man standing alone in a cheap motel room. Nothing else. No hallway. No figure. But his heart refused to slow down. Outside, Hollow Creek remained silent beneath heavy fog. Streetlights glowed faintly through the curtains, casting long shadows across the room. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed trying to think clearly. Something was wrong. Not just with the town. With him. Every time he tried remembering Blackthorn Mansion, his thoughts blurred painfully. It felt like trying to hold onto a dream after waking up. Names disappeared first. Then faces. Then entire events. But one thing remained perfectly clear. Fear. He remembered the fear. And somewhere beneath that fear lived another feeling. Something pulling him back. At around 3:17 a.m., the motel television turned on by itself. Static filled the screen. Ethan stared at it. Then shapes slowly emerged through the distortion. A hallway. Stone walls. The same hallway from the mirror. The camera moved slowly forward as though someone walked through the darkness carrying it. Ethan stood frozen. The footage continued silently. Dripping water echoed faintly from the speakers. Then the camera reached the end of the corridor. And stopped. A door stood there. Massive. Black. Covered in symbols Ethan almost recognized. The camera moved closer. Closer. Then the door began opening from the inside. Ethan's blood turned cold. Before the darkness behind the door became visible, the screen exploded into static again. Then words appeared. Live feed reconnected. Ethan grabbed the remote and shut the television off instantly. The room fell silent. But only for a moment. Knock. 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 Someone stood outside the motel door. Ethan slowly approached. Who is it? No answer. Only breathing. Slow. Heavy breathing. The exact same sound he had heard beneath the mansion. Ethan backed away immediately. Then came the whisper. Ethan. His stomach twisted. It was Evelyn's voice. Soft. Weak. Help me. Ethan stared at the door in horror. Part of him knew it wasn't really her. But another part, the part still trapped inside forgotten memories, wanted desperately to believe. The whisper came again. They found me. The lights flickered violently. Then the motel door handle began turning slowly. Ethan grabbed a lamp from the table as the lock clicked open by itself. The door creaked inward. Darkness waited outside. Not the motel hallway. A tunnel. Stone walls dripping with black water. The impossible hallway from the television. Cold air flowed into the room carrying the smell of wet earth and decay. And somewhere deep within the tunnel, something moved. Ethan stumbled backward. The motel room around him began changing. Wallpaper peeled away like rotting skin. The floorboards darkened. Water dripped from the ceiling. His room was becoming part of the tunnels. No, Ethan whispered. The breathing grew louder. Then footsteps echoed slowly from the darkness beyond the open doorway. One step. Another. Closer. Ethan raised the lamp with shaking hands. A figure emerged. Tall. Thin. Wrapped in darkness that moved unnaturally around its body. Its face remained hidden. But Ethan recognized the voice instantly. Walter Grady. You should have forgotten, the figure whispered. Ethan's chest tightened. You're dead. Walter laughed softly. No one here dies anymore. The figure stepped closer into the room. Its shape flickered constantly, as though reality struggled to keep it solid. Behind Walter, dozens of shadowy figures moved through the tunnel. Watching. Waiting. The heart is gone, Ethan said desperately. I destroyed it. Walter's expression twisted sadly. You destroyed one door. The motel walls trembled violently. Cracks spread across the ceiling. Black liquid seeped through them slowly. Walter pointed toward Ethan. But it remembers you now. Suddenly Ethan's head exploded with pain. Visions slammed into him. Ancient tunnels beneath mountains. Cities buried underground. People kneeling before darkness older than history itself. And at the center of everything, thousands of giant black hearts beating beneath the earth. Not one. Many. Ethan screamed and fell to his knees. Walter's voice echoed through the room. Blackthorn was never special. The shadows behind him moved closer. It was only the first place that opened. The motel completely disappeared. Ethan now stood inside the endless tunnels again. Stone stretched infinitely in every direction. Doors lined the walls. Hundreds of doors. Maybe thousands. Every single one breathing slowly. And behind each door, something alive waited patiently. Ethan backed away in terror. What is this place? Walter smiled. The place forgotten things go. One of the doors nearby began shaking violently. Scratching sounds came from the other side. Then another door started moving. Then another. Soon the entire tunnel echoed with pounding impacts from behind every sealed entrance. Something wanted out. Walter leaned closer. Humanity built cities over graves it never understood. The lights overhead flickered weakly. These tunnels existed long before memory. A distant roar echoed somewhere far below. Not animal, not human, massive, ancient. The tunnel walls trembled in response. Walter looked downward nervously for the first time. It knows you're awake. Ethan's breathing became uneven. What wants me? Walter's expression darkened. The same thing that wanted Richard. A sudden scream echoed from deeper within the tunnels. A woman screaming. Evelyn. Ethan turned instantly toward the sound. Far away, at the end of another corridor, he saw her. Standing beneath a flickering light. Red dress. Pale face. Terrified eyes. Ethan, she screamed. Dark hands burst from the walls around her, grabbing violently at her arms and legs. She fought desperately. Help me. Without thinking, Ethan ran toward her. Walter shouted something behind him, but the tunnel swallowed his voice. The corridor twisted unnaturally as Ethan sprinted through it. The lights above burst one by one as if something followed directly behind him in darkness. Evelyn kept screaming. The hands dragged her backward toward a massive door at the end of the tunnel. The door slowly opened. Blackness waited inside. Alive blackness. Ethan finally reached her and grabbed her arm. Her skin felt freezing cold. The hands tightened violently around her body. Ethan pulled harder. Then Evelyn suddenly stopped struggling. Her terrified expression vanished instantly. Slowly, she smiled. Ethan froze. Her eyes turned completely black. You remembered me, she whispered. The tunnel lights exploded. Every door in the endless corridor swung open together. And from the darkness behind them, thousands of whispers answered at once. The whispers spread through the tunnels like a living storm. Thousands of voices. Male, female, young, ancient, all speaking together in broken fragments. Open. Finally, he remembers. Let us through. Ethan stumbled backward, still gripping Evelyn's arm. But her skin no longer felt human. It pulsed beneath his fingers like something breathing under flesh. Her smile widened slowly. Too wide. You shouldn't have come back, she whispered softly. Then her body began changing. Black veins crawled across her neck and face. Her jaw cracked loudly as her head tilted unnaturally to one side. Ethan released her immediately and backed away in horror. No. The thing wearing Evelyn's face stepped forward. You carried us out with you. Behind her, the darkness inside the open door moved violently. Shapes crawled within it. Huge shapes. Too many limbs. Too many eyes. Ethan turned and ran. The tunnels erupted with movement around him. Hands burst from the walls trying to grab his clothes. The doors lining the corridor slammed open and shut violently as whispers poured from inside. Some rooms looked impossibly large. Others contained only darkness. But inside every doorway, something watched him. The lights overhead flickered rapidly. One by one they died behind him. Darkness chased him through the tunnels. Fast. Ethan's lungs burned. He had no idea where he was going anymore. The corridors twisted endlessly, changing direction every time he looked away. Symbols appeared across the walls again, glowing faintly black beneath the stone. Then he heard footsteps ahead. Real footsteps. Human. Ethan slowed suddenly. A figure stood beneath a flickering light farther down the corridor. A woman, holding a lantern. For one terrible second Ethan thought it was Evelyn again. But this woman looked older. Her gray hair hung loose over a dark coat, and deep scars crossed one side of her face. She stared directly at Ethan. Run faster, she said calmly. Then the lights behind Ethan exploded. The darkness surged forward like a wave. The woman grabbed Ethan's arm and pulled him into a side tunnel just as black hands erupted from the main corridor where he'd been standing. The tunnel door slammed shut behind them. Silence. Ethan collapsed against the wall gasping. The woman raised the lantern toward his face carefully. So you're the one who burned Blackthorn. Ethan stared at her. Who are you? The woman hesitated. Someone who survived another door. Cold fear crawled through Ethan's chest. Another mansion. She nodded slowly. There were many. The lantern light revealed old symbols carved into the tunnel around them. Ethan recognized some immediately from beneath Blackthorn Hill. The woman noticed his expression. You've seen the marks before. What is this place? Ethan demanded. What are those things? The woman remained silent for several seconds. Then she answered quietly. The world beneath memory. Ethan frowned. She continued walking deeper into the tunnel while speaking. Thousands of years ago, people discovered something under the earth. Not a creature exactly. Something older. The lantern flickered. It learned humanity through fear. Through grief. Through memory. Ethan followed her cautiously. In Blackthorn Mansion, Richard Blackthorn found one of the buried entrances. The woman stopped beside an old iron door covered in chains. He believed he could control it. A faint pounding came from behind the chained door. Slow, heavy, thump, thump. Ethan stepped backward immediately. The woman's eyes darkened. That sound never leaves once you hear it. Ethan felt sick. The heart. There are many hearts, she interrupted. The pounding behind the door became louder. Thump, thump, thump. The chains rattled violently. The woman lowered her voice. Every heart is connected. Ethan's mind raced. How do you know all this? For the first time, emotion appeared on her face. Pain. Because I opened one. Silence filled the tunnel. The woman looked away. My town disappeared 30 years ago. The lantern trembled slightly in her hand. I thought I destroyed it too. Another violent impact shook the chained door. Dust rained from the ceiling. The woman grabbed Ethan suddenly. You need to understand something before it finds us. What? Her expression became deadly serious. The thing beneath the doors cannot create. The tunnel lights flickered dimly around them. It only copies. Ethan remembered Evelyn smiling with black eyes. Cold terror spread through him. That wasn't really her. The woman shook her head slowly. No. The pounding behind the chained door stopped abruptly. Complete silence followed, and somehow that silence felt worse. The woman's face turned pale. It's listening. A whisper suddenly echoed from the darkness ahead. Clara. The woman froze instantly. Ethan stared at her. Who's Clara? The whisper came again. Closer this time. Clara. Please. A child's voice. The woman began trembling violently. My son, she whispered. The tunnel ahead darkened unnaturally. A small figure slowly appeared beneath the shadows. A little boy, around 8 years old, wearing old pajamas stained with dirt. He looked up at Clara with tears in his eyes. Mom. Clara's breathing became uneven. No, she whispered. You aren't real. The boy took another small step forward. You left me there. Ethan watched Clara carefully. She knew it was fake. But grief was stronger than logic. The boy began crying softly. It was dark. Clara covered her mouth, trembling. Stop. Why didn't you come back for me? The shadows behind the child thickened slowly. Something massive moved inside them. Watching. Waiting. Ethan realized the truth instantly. The entity used memory as bait. It learned what people loved. Then wore those memories like masks. The fake child stretched one hand toward Clara. Please. Clara broke. She rushed forward toward the boy. Don't. Ethan screamed. Too late. The child smiled suddenly. Its mouth split open far beyond human limits. Black hands erupted from the darkness behind it and wrapped around Clara instantly. She screamed as the shadows dragged her backward. The lantern hit the floor and rolled wildly. Ethan grabbed Clara's arm desperately. For one moment he almost pulled her free. Then something enormous opened its eyes inside the darkness behind her. Hundreds of eyes, all staring at Ethan. The whispers returned instantly. He sees us. He remembers. Bring him lower. The darkness pulled harder. Clara looked at Ethan one final time. Then she shoved him away violently. Run. The shadows swallowed her whole. The tunnel became silent again. Only the lantern remained, spinning slowly across the floor. Ethan stood frozen in horror. Then the chained door behind him exploded inward. Something huge began crawling out. The sound of snapping metal echoed through the tunnel. Chains whipped across the walls as the iron door bent outward like paper. Something massive forced itself through the opening. At first Ethan only saw darkness moving. Then claws. Long black claws scraping against stone. A gigantic arm unfolded from the doorway, followed by another, each one thin and jointed wrong, bending in impossible directions. The creature dragged itself halfway into the tunnel while dozens of pale human faces shifted beneath its skin like trapped souls trying to escape. Its body never stayed the same shape for long. Bones cracked beneath flesh. Limbs split apart and reformed. Eyes opened randomly across its surface before melting shut again. And at the center of the thing, a familiar face slowly emerged. Richard Blackthorn. His features stretched painfully through the creature's chest. We remember you, he whispered. Ethan stumbled backward in terror. The creature crawled fully into the tunnel now, forcing the walls outward around its enormous body. The air became heavy instantly, difficult to breathe. The lantern on the floor flickered weakly. Richard's face smiled from inside the monster. You burned one heart. More faces emerged beside him. Walter, Evelyn, Clara, even the little boy. Their mouths moved together. But memory cannot die. The tunnel behind Ethan suddenly shifted. Walls grinding. Stone moving. The path was changing again. The entity was trapping him deeper underground. Ethan grabbed the lantern and ran. The creature shrieked behind him, its many limbs smashing through the tunnel as it gave chase. The sound was unbearable, a mixture of screams, whispers, and laughter layered together into one impossible voice. The tunnels twisted endlessly. Every corridor looked identical now. Ancient stone, dripping water, doors breathing softly in darkness. Ethan turned sharply around a corner and nearly crashed into a wall covered in writing. Thousands of names carved into the stone. Some old, some recent, and near the bottom, his own name. Ethan Vale. Freshly carved. Still wet. No, he whispered. The whispers around him grew louder immediately. You belong below now. He remembers too much. Open him. The lantern light dimmed suddenly. Then footsteps echoed ahead. Slow, human footsteps. Ethan froze. A figure emerged from the darkness carrying another lantern. A man, middle-aged, wearing old mining clothes covered in dust. His beard was streaked white and his eyes looked exhausted beyond words. When he saw Ethan, his face changed instantly. You're alive. Ethan stared at him cautiously. Who are you? The man grabbed his arm urgently. Not here. The creature roared somewhere behind them. The man pulled Ethan through a narrow crack in the wall hidden behind loose stones. They squeezed into a tiny chamber barely large enough to stand inside. The man extinguished the lantern immediately. Darkness swallowed them. Outside, the creature crawled past. Its limbs scraped against stone inches away from their hiding place. Ethan held his breath. The whispers moved with the monster. Searching. Hungry. Then gradually the sounds faded deeper into the tunnels. Silence returned. The man finally relit the lantern weakly. His hands trembled badly. How long has it been since you came down here? Ethan asked. The man laughed quietly. A broken laugh. I don't know anymore. He sat against the wall heavily. Time doesn't work properly below. Ethan studied him carefully. You live here. Survive here. The man looked toward the tunnel outside fearfully. There's a difference. Ethan noticed symbols carved all over the tiny chamber. Protective circles. Warnings. Tallies scratched into stone. Thousands of tallies. How long have you been trapped? The man stared silently at the marks. Long enough to forget sunlight. Cold fear settled inside Ethan again. What is this place really? The man hesitated. Then he answered quietly. These tunnels connect everything. Ethan frowned. What do you mean? The man pointed upward. Every forgotten place. Every buried town. Every abandoned building where people vanished without explanation. The lantern flickered harder. They're all connected underground. Ethan's stomach twisted. All of them. The man nodded slowly. The entity spreads through memory itself. Like roots beneath the earth. A distant scream echoed somewhere impossibly far below them. Not human anymore. The man closed his eyes painfully. It learns from us. Ethan remembered Clara's fake son. It copies people. No, the man whispered. It copies emotions. Silence filled the chamber again. Then the man looked directly at Ethan. That's why it wants you. Why me? Because you escaped. The words hit Ethan hard. The man continued. No one escapes the doors twice. The lantern dimmed lower. The moment you left Blackthorn alive, it became connected to you. Ethan shook his head desperately. I destroyed the heart. The man's expression darkened. You destroyed the shell. A heavy impact suddenly shook the wall beside them. Dust poured from cracks in the ceiling. Another impact followed. Closer. The creature had returned. The man cursed under his breath. It can smell fear. The wall outside groaned loudly as claws scraped across stone. Then came Richard's voice. Soft. Right beside them. You cannot hide memories forever. The hidden chamber walls began pulsing slowly like breathing flesh. The symbols carved into the stone started bleeding black liquid. The man grabbed Ethan's shoulder tightly. There's only one way out now. Another violent impact split the wall slightly. Long black fingers pushed through the crack. What way? Ethan demanded. The man looked terrified. You have to go deeper. Ethan stared at him in disbelief. Deeper. The man nodded. To the first door. The whispers outside became deafening. The creature laughed with hundreds of voices together. Yes, Richard whispered. Bring him lower. The hidden chamber suddenly exploded inward. Stone shattered everywhere. The creature forced itself through the wall screaming. Its many faces twisted wildly across its body. The man shoved Ethan toward a narrow tunnel opening behind them. Run. Ethan hesitated only a second before sprinting into the darkness. Behind him the man screamed. Then the screaming stopped abruptly. The tunnel ahead sloped downward steeply. Deeper. Hotter. The air itself felt alive now. And somewhere far below, Ethan heard it. A heartbeat. Massive. Ancient. Waiting.